Good morning everyone, welcome to Our Small Footprint. My name is Nyssa, and if you're new here, we are a family of 8 who live off-grid in Australia. I have another food prep video for February for you. I was supposed to do the voiceover yesterday afternoon and I didn't, so I'm doing it this morning. I'm still working on the colour on this screen for these talking head parts of the video. It looks okay on my screen, but when I load it up on the computer, sometimes it has a really yellow tone to it, so I'm still figuring that out, so sorry if it's looking crappy. So today's, I've just noticed a stuffed panda up on the roof of the greenhouse, like random. Anyway, today's video is a food prep video, so it is this part 2 of February. So if you're new here, we go shopping every 6 weeks, and after those 6 weeks I post videos about how we do the meal prep, planning, preserving and everything of the food that we get, because one of the biggest questions I always got was how do we make the food last the 6 weeks. So this is showing you a bit about how we make a 6-week grocery shop work for us, and what we use and don't use and all that sort of thing, to make sure that we have a good variety of food over that 6 weeks. We are due for the once a month food hamper this weekend, I think it is. So each month, every 4 weeks, we have access to a community food hamper. We pay $50, we get what we're given. It's like a food pantry, food bank sort of a thing. So I'm pretty sure that is due Saturday, so I will share that when we get that as well. And then I try and share some of the meals we make, adding that into our 6-weekly haul as well, so that people can see how we use some of the slightly odd stuff that we don't normally buy but we get in these food hampers. But for the moment, this is part 2 of the food prep and planning for February 24. Started the day off with making yogurt because the kids have this with granola. I use it in smoothie pops and some baking and things like that, so it's always nice to have in the fridge. I recently upgraded to this Louvel yogurt maker. I will try and put a link in the comments. There's a affiliate code that I get a percentage on if you purchase through it and things like that. I really like this one because it has a water bath thermos with a timer and a digital temperature setting as well. I used to have a really inexpensive plastic thermos ones, but in the heat of the day it would overheat and the yogurt would curdle a little bit. So this one is better for that. Also a nice big 2-litre glass jar. I use UHT milk because that way I don't have to denature the milk. I don't have to heat it and then bring it back down to temperature. So UHT milk, being shelf stable, works perfectly for us. And put it all in the jar. I use 75 to 100 grams of milk powder to help thicken it, a couple of drops of calcium chloride, again that helps to thicken it, and 1/4 to 1/3 of a cup of a previous batch of yogurt or some yogurt that I've bought and put in the fridge purposely to use for this purpose. Whisk it all up, stick it in the machine for 12 hours and then it's done. We had leftover cheese from the nachos the night before, leftover dairy-free cheese that sets into like this cream cheese type consistency when it's put in the fridge. So we had some quesadillas for breakfast with the ham that we got cheap. So we got some ham cheap that came in 1 kilo bags, needed to be either frozen or used up fairly quickly. We have some other stuff that's sealed with a lot longer use by date because it's in a sealed container, but this 1 kilo lots were only $7 for the kilo, and they're sort of loose in the bag, so they need to be used up a little bit quicker. So we had the ham with the dairy-free cheese, which now is like a cheese spread, and some tomatoes, and we just used the tortillas that I buy from Costco, the burrito style tortillas that are really cheap. They're a pack of 3, you get 36 for $8, so pretty good price for what they are, to save me having to make flatbreads or tortillas every day, though I do tend to make them multiple times a week anyway, but it's still handy to have. So we made quesadillas for breakfast or lunch or whatever you want to call it there. The next thing I got done was those roasted tomatoes. So I had roasted those tomatoes in the previous video, and by the end of the day I was over it, so I had not frozen them, just put them in the fridge, put them in Tupperware, put them in the fridge. So what I need to do is then do the last step of them. So I pureed them in the Thermomix. If I wanted them really smooth, I would have done them in 2 different batches on a really high speed for like 30 seconds each. But this is pizza sauce, so it's allowed to have a little bit of texture to it because it doesn't really matter. Now the biggest thing with skin-on tomatoes, even roasted ones, when you're pureeing them, is if you don't puree them really well, you get those little sticks of skin, the curled up bits of skin in the sauce, which is horrible if you're eating it as like a soup or something like that. But as a pizza sauce, it's part of many dozen textures, so it really doesn't make any difference. So I just poured it all in and gave it a quick whiz in the Thermomix just to break it all down. I then put it into a pot to cook down because it's still slightly watery after having been roasted like that. So you could push it through a moule or something if you wanted and take some of the juice out or whatever else, but I prefer to just cook that juice down. Now I do also add a jar of tomato paste in there as well, and that's going to help thicken it up too, which is just going to reduce my cooking time, but also is going to stop us losing as much volume. So by cooking down the tomatoes, you're losing volume, so you're losing end product. By adding that tomato paste, you have to cook it down less, which means that I'm losing less end product, just so that I get a few more jars out of it, sort of thing. You can add any other flavors you want. You still do have to cook it down a little bit, even with tomato paste added, but just not as much. Add whatever flavors you want to there, just things to cut the acidity, being that it's basically straight tomatoes if you need to. So a little bit of balsamic vinegar is sometimes nice, a little bit of sugar is sometimes nice, a bit of vegeta or bouillon is sometimes nice for that flavor depth, that umami flavor, Worcestershire sauce, soy sauce, anything like that you want, just a little bit at a time to get the flavor that you're after. While that was cooking down, I used on the other hot plate, I started the cordial that I needed to make. So I had the mango pips and skins from the last box of mangoes that we had eaten. I didn't end up keeping most of them because the kids just ate them over a span of a few days and they just gave the rest to the animals. So, but the last box I purposely cut up. I got one of the kids to cut up for me. And I wonder where, I'm sure I took footage of the kids doing some of this. I wonder where all that footage has ended up. I'll have to have a look. But I got the kids to cut up one of the trays of mangoes for me, and because I got them to do the bananas too. Anyway, cut up the last tray of mangoes and put all the skins and pips into a bowl for me so that I could use them for cordial. So I just froze that bowl of pips and skins so that I could use it. So now I'm going to use it to make cordial. Geez, that was a bit of a ramble, wasn't it? So I've got a big pot of water, put all the skins in there, and I also added a whole bunch of frozen fruit that I had. So there was some pineapple and peach scraps out of the freezer. There's some frozen cubes of what I thought was actually strawberries, but turned out to be watermelon, which is fine. There was some mango, a couple of big cubes of lemon juice, just a whole bunch of bits of frozen fruit that I pulled out of the freezer that was left in Ziploc bags. I bring it to a simmer with the lid on, and then once you've simmered it for say 15 minutes, you can steep it either overnight in the fridge or just for a couple of hours. Now, I didn't want to put the pot in the fridge today. It was still fairly early in the day, so I just put it aside for a couple of hours. While that was steeping and the tomatoes are still cooking down, I cut up beef for the mincer. So in this temperature, and because this new lot of beef trim has a lot of silver skin, the mincer works really hard to mince it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to chop it up and put it in the freezer for an hour or two to chill, because the more, so long as it's not frozen, but colder it is, the easier the mincer works to get it through the blades, because the mincer heats up as it's mincing, and then you end up with sort of a mushy mince rather than a nice textured mince. So if I chill it, then it will go through the mincer easier, and the mincer won't work as hard, and the texture will be better. So I'm going to throw that in the freezer for a couple of hours until I am ready to mince it, but by doing that it will help me do that mincing later. There was also kids coming and going at that point with workbooks for help with the schoolwork that they were doing while I was doing all that, so I think there's a few little snippets of that as well. After the beef was cut up and the bench was cleared again, I strained the cordial. Now, if you want it clear, you don't want to agitate the fruit when you're straining. So by agitating the fruit when you're straining, you're going to get pulp and stuff into your cordial. And if you don't want that, then you need to just pour it through and hang it without any agitation. We don't mind a bit of pulp in our cordial, so I just agitate it through and get it nice and quickly done. Once strained, I rinse the pot and measure it back in. Now, a lot of rule of thumbs of cordial is a 1-to-1 ratio, so like 1 cup of liquid to 1 cup of sugar. That's too sweet for us. We don't like it that sweet. So my general ratio is a 1-to-3, but it really depends on the fruit. So some fruit is more tart than others, some it's sweeter than others, so I sort of judge it by that. But I generally start at a 1 to 3. So per cup of liquid, I do 1/3 of a cup of sugar. And then I'll add more if necessary. We also add a heaped tablespoon of citric acid because we like that little zingy zingy flavour to it, a bit like a mineral water, but that does mean that you might have to add a little bit more sugar if you're not into that. I normally add tartaric acid as well, which helps to stop any fermentation in the bottle. I don't think I did here, and I think that was just purely because I forgot. But I normally add citric acid and tartaric acid because tartaric acid helps with stopping any fermentation if it's not acidic enough, and the citric acid helps with the colour. It makes it a really nice, bright, vibrant colour, and also, again, it acidifies it, brings up the pH of the thing that you're canning. Then it just goes on the stove with the sugar and stuff in it, and until the sugar is dissolved through and everything is nice and smooth again. I decanted it into the passata bottles. This is what I tend to use for my cordial. I really like how they have a narrow mouth on them, so you don't over pour them when you're using them for things. And realistically, these muddy passata bottles that I like to collect, their main use is cordial and things like Worcestershire sauce and stuff like that. That's what I tend to use them for. Once I decanted all the cordial out, the pizza sauce was ready. It was a good texture, consistency. It was perfectly for me. So I'm going to decant that as well. So I decanted that into Fowler's Vicola 20s, which I use as basically an equivalent to a pint. Cleaned the lids and rims as per usual, white vinegar, cloth, wipe the rims down really well, clean the inside of the lids and put them on. The Fowler's Vicola obviously have the rubber rings and then the lids and then the clips, and the passata bottles are lug lid jars. I use a range of new and second-hand lids for the lug lid jars. I'm using all new Fowler's rings because I have them, and we're going to steam can these in the pressure canner. The passata doesn't fit in the steam canner, so I can't use that. But actually they ended up too high to double stack them in the pressure canner for steam canning, so I used both. I heated up the water in the steam canner for the Fowler's Vicola jars for the pizza sauce, because you want the temperature in the canner to be similar to the temperature in the jars, and then put the jars in the steam canner and put the lid on that one. Then I put 3 litres of water into the Presto and the rack on the bottom, put the passata jars, warmed that up so that it was the same temperature as the jars, warmed that up and stuck the jars in there and put the lid on that as well. Now the steam canner needs to be in the dark green zone for my altitude, so once it hits that dark green zone then I start my timer. It was actually ready to be turned off around about the same time that the Presto only just started being ready to start the timer, which is the benefit of the steam canner. There's a lot less water in there and it's a lot thinner, smaller cavity, so it heats up a lot faster than the Presto, but as I said, the passata jars don't fit in the steam canner. So I turned the steam canner off and then started the timer for the Presto. Once done, it's onto the bench for 24 hours. As all jars, you want the resting is part of the processing time, so that 24-hour or 12 to 24-hour time, you don't test the seals until the end of that, until the jars are completely cooled and have been sitting stationary for a while. You can see in the background in the next shot that all those jars had come out and been put on the bench. After I got those all out, I pulled the beef out of the freezer to mince it. So I ran it all through the Lavelle mincer. Again, I've got 2 Lavelle products in this one. I really like this mincer. It's a really low power draw and it just works. It's just so easy to put together and pull apart. One of my favorite things. And then put it back in the fridge once it was minced. So there was 2 bowls that were put in the freezer. I pulled 1 bowl at a time, minced it, put it back in the fridge and did the same thing, so that we're still keeping it chilled because it's a horribly warm temperature today. Then pulled the mincer apart, cleaned it up and put it away. So the plan to do with this mince was to make bolognese. We have none left in the freezer, and it's one of those meals that I like to have quite a quantity of in the freezer because it's a simple meal to make. Now I don't can my bolognese because I add lentils or pearl barley to it for a start, but I'm not a huge fan of the texture of canned ground beef or mince. It's a little bit mushier than I'd like, So if I was going to can a bolognese type sauce, I would probably do a ragu type thing with chunks of beef in it. But the other thing is too that when we make bolognese, I freeze it in like 1.2 to 1.5 kilo lots. And to have that quantity would be 2 big jars worth, and it just seems inefficient to do it that way. It's much more efficient just to freeze it. For this particular, it's one of the only dishes that I don't can, that I prefer frozen. Again, the lentils and the pearl barley mean that you're not supposed to can it anyway. I start off by using my favourite sous chef, which is my Thermomix. I mince up all my veggies, so I use zucchini, carrot, celery, onion, whatever I have, mushrooms, whatever I have available I use in and mince it all up and use it as my base. I cook it off with some garlic and some bacon. These are the bacon bits that I got really cheap from the butcher, so they work well in this kind of a dish. And cook it all off until the water has until the water's come out of the veggies and then has evaporated again. Once it's cooked off, I added the beef, I broke it up and cooked it off until it was not as pink anymore. And then I added about 8 cups of lentils, which just happened to be the end of a bag that I had. It's varied as to how many I add. It doesn't really matter, but this is quite a large batch of bolognese. I'm using the really big pot that I got given by a viewer too. I don't know who sent this one. It was sent without any name on it, but this brand of pot is my favorite brand of pot, and I didn't have this 27-litre one, and someone sent it to me, and I am super grateful. Once I mixed the lentils through, I started adding the liquid. So I used one of the giant 2.5 kilo tins of diced tomatoes. I used passata and a little water in the passata jars to clean them out. And then a jar of tomato paste. As the lentils absorb the liquid, I add more passata, some stock, some water if needed, just to keep the liquid level above the level of the passata and the mince, and allow those lentils to absorb that liquid slowly so that they soften up as they go through. I tend to add some salt, some balsamic vinegar, some bouillon to taste, and those sorts of things as flavour as well. Most of the flavour comes from the beef and the veggies, but I do like to add those few umami type things, the Worcestershire sauce and things like that. There would have been an extra probably 6 jars of passata added in the end, and a bit of stock as well, I think, but I just kept on adding as needed. I assessed it by the pot. Now, I didn't start this early enough for it to end up being ready for dinner, because we need to get those lentils really nice and soft, because the kids complain if there's a bit of a bite to them. So we actually did a quick pesto pasta and leftovers for dinner, which I didn't film. But after dinner, the lentils still weren't quite as soft, so I left it simmering and decided to make sourdough waffle mix with the starter that's been in the fridge too long. So I really need to start feeding up my starter again and getting it nice and healthy, so I need to use the old stuff up. I could discard it, but I've been on lots of videos here and I don't discard. I like to use it because it can be used. So we made waffle mix with the starter that's been in the fridge for overnight waffles, so that I could feed my starter and start getting it better fed and better and healthier, so I can start making bread with it again when the weather cools down. So you leave the mix overnight on the bench. It doesn't have certain things in it. There's no eggs in it or anything like that yet, so you just leave it overnight on the bench. I actually brought it inside because we have issues with the bush rats, and then you add the extras in the morning. So at about 8 p.m. I called it good for the bolognese, turned it off and let it cool down a bit. Another time that it's good to do this in winter is that the temperatures overnight are cold enough that you can just put the lid on it and leave it in the kitchen, because it gets down to 0. But it's not that temperature yet, so I put the lid on it and left it sit there, and told Darryl that he needed to put it in the fridge before he went to bed, because he goes to bed a few hours after me. The next morning I tested the seals on all the jars and got them on the shelves. So for me, I like to take the clips off, rings off, or whatever I need to do, and I will make sure that you can pick them up by the lid without the lid coming loose. With the lug lid jars, if they don't have a little pop top on them, then I tap them. There's a different sound when you tap them if they're sealed and if they're not. There's a different sort of a hollow versus dull sound, and just check that they look like they're concave before putting them on the shelves. Wipe them down if needed. These jars were very clean. There was no seepage in any of the steam canners, so they were all good. Then I added the extras to the waffle batter. We plugged in the new waffle irons into the power pack. This power pack is actually currently plugged into the Jackery as a pass-through, because that's the whole purpose of the waffle makers, was to test out using it with the Jackery. I do need to get some photos of it plugged directly into the Jackery and stuff and show you how it works, but it was a quick thing this morning. So it was plugged into the power pack. The power pack is actually plugged into the Jackery, which was plugged into the solar to be charging. I wasn't actually sure how it was going to work, so it was a bit of a test run. So sometimes when I'm doing these test runs, I don't film them because I don't have high expectations, and then I regret it because they work and I should have. But anyway, I tested out different quantities that might be needed for the waffle makers because they were new and they're a mini one. A third of a cup worked out pretty perfect for this style dough, but it's a very thick gelatinous type batter, so it might be a bit less if it was liquidy. I'm not real sure, but for the sourdough batter, it was about a third of a cup that worked out and filled each hole, and it overflowed a little bit. It created a lot of steam and rise. When you unpop them, they do a big pop, which means that all the surfaces are touching the hot plates to get nice and crunchy. So you know that worked well. We ended up getting 24 out of the batch, which is perfect. That's 3 each, so that was 3 each to eat for that meal, or to eat some and put some in the fridge to toast up later. We don't own a toaster because they use a fair bit of power, but they could be toasted on cast iron easily enough, I reckon. But the kids are probably quite happy to eat them cold too, for that matter. So, or maybe in the barbecue on a rack, so that they crisp up both sides or something. I don't know. We'll have a test. Maybe even if we've got the Jackery set up, you just reheat them in the waffle iron. It only take 30 seconds for each one. I don't know. We'll have to play with that. For the moment, everyone ate what they ate, and I think the ones that were left just got eaten out of the fridge cold. So I had thought about making them in bulk so that I could have like a freezer full and we could reheat them for meals. But when I look at the quantities that were required just to make one meal, the time and quantities required to make one meal, I don't think that would be worthwhile. I think we're better off just cooking them every now and again. I don't know. I'll have to test that out. Maybe a thinner batter, not so much effort, or I get the kids to do it at some point. But anyway, we need a lot of waffles to make it worthwhile to freeze some, I think. We served them up with some bacon fried up and some maple syrup. The only thing it was missing would, ice cream would have been nice. But we didn't have any, and it was breakfast. But maybe I need to make some ice cream, maybe some maple flavored ice cream or something. And then we can have like a breakfast for dinner night or something, and we can have them with bacon and maple and ice cream or something. Maybe. We'll see. I made a simple dinner that night. We're using up the bulk of the fresh green veg that I bought, so as I always say, there's certain things that have to get used first. Chicken has to be processed, used, or frozen, and green veg are the other things that tend to go off fairly quickly if they're not stored appropriately, and some things just won't store very well. So we had a green chicken curry, which I just used the Valcom green curry paste I buy in a lot of my grocery hauls when it's on special. We use half a jar per dish that we make. I made some coconut rice, and I'm slowly mastering getting my coconut rice quite coconutty and wet. We like a wet coconut rice with a curry. I've tweaked it and tweaked and tweaked it. I might have to share it at some point because I think I've finally got it how I like it. Doing the absorption method on the stovetop, that is. And it has fish sauce in it and a little bit of sugar, and like the curry does, and the curry paste and some coconut cream, and then I just cook off chicken in it and then fill it with as many veggies as possible. So there was zucchini and broccoli and beans and whatever I have. I have used frozen veggies in these, but I do prefer to have it in the beginning of the month when we've got the fresh ones, and I have done them with just zucchini when I've had some big zucchinis come out of the garden, because it softens really nicely in the curry. I can use the bigger marrow style zucchinis for this sort of a dish and just fill it with zucchini. Served up as usual just over that bed of coconut rice. Now I do get some comments about our serving sizes. I think a part of that is because we're not exactly snackers. Darryl and I have most of the time 2 meals a day. Sometimes in winter we end up having 3. Most of the time we have 2 meals a day, and they're significant size meals because we don't really eat anything in between. We have water, an iced coffee at some point during the day, generally speaking in summer, or hot coffee or tea during the day in winter. Our coffee of the morning, coffee at night after dinner, or tea after dinner at night, and not much else. Occasionally I bake cookies and stuff. We might have a cookie with our tea. The kids snack, of course. I bake them muffins and granolas and yogurts and all sorts of things. But for us in general, we don't tend to snack. So our meals, I try and make a nutritionally dense, significant size meal is what we sit down to eat, and that's the way we work it. And I suppose we do the fasting, not on purpose, but we try and finish dinner up before 7:30 at night, because Darryl gets reflux, so we want to eat it nice and early, and then we don't eat again until 10 to 12 the next day, sort of thing. And it seems to work for us, appetite wise and quantity wise. And I have broken down our, you know, calorie intakes and stuff before, out of curiosity, and because medicos like to question me all the time about my weight, and we eat under the calorie count that we need to for what we do, and I'm happy with it, so it's fine. But I just thought I'd mention that, yeah, we do have large serving sizes because we only really eat those 2 meals a day. So we have significant sized meals for that. We're just not generally snackers. So that was another part of February's food prep from the groceries. I've been thinking about my video, what I'm trying to do with scheduling videos and stuff. This was supposed to come out this morning and I didn't make it. And then I was supposed to, because I was supposed to finish the voiceover yesterday and I didn't get there, and then this morning when I was doing the voiceover I realized that I had missed some of my notes, and so I got to the end of the notes and went, darn it, there's more video. So I'm thinking that because of the work that I do in the middle of the week with typing and stuff, that I might end up aiming for this year, you know, the next month or so, try and work it out on sort of a Tuesday, Friday, Sunday schedule, with Saturdays mixed in if there's something else to go in there. And that might work for me, sort of a 3 times a week with a 4th one in there every second week or so, depending. Like we've got the food hamper tomorrow, so there'll be one tomorrow as well, and then I'll get another food prep sort of video going as well for Sunday. We'll see how we go, but that might be what I aim to do. At the moment I'm doing a lot of trying to figure out this whole building thing, getting all the stuff that we need here at the same time so that we can just get it done, and pricing, getting different quotes from different places and things like that. We're gonna have to hire a trailer to go and collect some of the equipment because it's 3.6 meters long and our trailer's only 2 meters long and the ute's only 1.8 tray, so, or 2.4, whatever it is. It's a dual cab ute. It doesn't have a particularly long tray on it, and we do have ladder racks, but things like the insulated roof paneling is only 38 kilos per sheet, but we need 9 of them, so the height of that would be an issue. And then the flooring is the same. It's 44 kilos per, and we need 11 of them, so we're just going to hire a car trailer. I think Darryl might end up having to go down on like Thursday, stay the night somewhere and drive back Friday with the car trailer with the joists, the floor and the roofing all in one go. I think that's looking like the way we're going to do it. So anyway, that was part 2, and I will see you guys on the next video. Thanks for watching, guys.